You are listening to Fika with Vicky on United Public Radio, 107.7 and 105.3 from New Orleans.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fika. Our returning guest today is author Shane Joseph, who is also the owner and publisher of Blue Denim Press. During Shane's last visit, we discussed his novels Empire in the Sand and Circles in the Spiral. I found them gritty. I have a soft spot for gritty, honest, and thought-provoking, inspiring me to read more of his works. Having done that, I've invited him back to discuss the Ulysses Man and Milltown because he still has me thinking and questioning. Here's my review of the Ulysses Man. Born into a world without choices, Martin James learns their importance and consequences early. Overthinking becomes his ally as he maneuvers around child molesters, an alcoholic father, a mother with mental illness, and an unstable government. His instincts grow stronger as his trust diminishes. His innate integrity becomes an obstacle. He has one hope. Will it bring him peace? Author Shane Joseph opens curtains in the world for us to peek through, encouraging us past our comfort zone. And through this lighted realism, we may learn, be inspired, and feel. The Ulysses Man is the book I read in one day, never stopping during the 10-hour stretch. It's the book I'm still thinking about 3 days later, and the book I'll be thinking about for years to come. Thanks for the Ulysses Man and Milltown, Shane, and welcome to Fika.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
I'll read a couple more books and you'll be back. Though I also want to read some of the books of people that you publish too. So I'm going to have to put you on the shelf for a little bit. Like, there goes Shane.
No problem.
You described the Ulysses Man as an autobiographical novel. And what exactly is that? Is it fact? Is it fiction?
Yeah, well, I like to call it faction. So it's a bit of both. It's imagined incidents and a storyline.
Okay, just a minute because I want everybody to get that. And Brian just said there's no sound on YouTube. I don't know why that would be. Just a sec.
Okay.
I'm just going to turn my mute off for a second. Testing? Oh, Jenna says, testing? David, can you hear me? And you're on YouTube. Okay. Can you hear me on Facebook? Janice, you're on Facebook? Okay, so it's a YouTube problem. Anybody who's on YouTube, could you switch over to Facebook? Go to the Fika. Okay, it's Brian's fault. It's just Brian. Only Brian can hear. But thanks, Brian, because I always want to keep up with what's going on out there in tech world. I can't hear. Okay, Shane, you were saying you like to call it fact.
Yes, I'd like to call it faction because it's a bit of both. It's a storyline, a fictitious storyline that's based on a lot of factual incidents that took place. For instance, this is a 3-part book, as you read. Part 1 and part 3 is drawn heavily from my life. And part 2, which is the section in Canada, I have fictionalized based on what could have happened to my life if I had followed a different path. So there's a blending of fact and fiction in this novel. That's why I call it an autobiographical novel.
Oh, we were just discussing in the green room about how this was like your life in a lot of ways. And it is, I can say that there's a lot of trauma in this book. and you're growing up and the people growing up around you. And so I just want to mention to the folks out there, it can be a hard read if you've had some situations in your life that coincide with those, or even if they're things that you don't want to hear about. But if it's possible, I encourage the read because it brings a lot of understanding to parts of the world that we may not actually know about in this kind of on this kind of level from a personal experience. So, Shane, while you were writing this book, that was so close, did you find it cathartic to, or was it like emotionally encompassing? How did you get through it from a writer's perspective?
There's elements of all of that. I mean, I don't like to write my catharsis and dump it on the reader. But in reliving some of the incidents, I was able to exorcise some of them. But there was a long time period between when I wrote them and when I had experienced them. So I think I had a certain amount of distance between those events. Some things you can never really get away from. If you were to describe me today, I'll say I'm still a traumatized kid.
Which is understandable.
Right, given some of the things that happen in the book. But I'm at peace with myself in terms of those things that happen. I can't change history, but I reconcile myself to them, and I've now tried to convert them into an art form that can be digested, hopefully, by readers who have a strong stomach. Now, a couple of things I want to also qualify is that even though I described, and this is where the fiction part comes in, I've fictionalized Martin James, the protagonist's entry into Canada. He came in illegally. I did not come into Canada illegally. I immigrated officially, and I also wasn't associated with the mob like he was. Although I did know of many of my countrymen, less fortunate ones, who were squeezed by mob-like elements, and you notice that in
Like in Millhouse. Yes, that was.
And that was true. People were being pressured to contribute to the revolution that was going on back home. And so they were in Canada, hopefully safe, but not quite safe because they were under threat. So there's elements of, borrowing from things I had seen and observed and mixing them up with my own life experiences in this book.
And it's you did it very well, because I didn't know where the reality and the fiction came and went. So I've been trying to oh, that popped up on Facebook. Well, then that can't be the way. You know? Trying to be my own detective here, Shane, but definitely. So for the people out there who haven't read this book and haven't heard a lot about Sri Lanka and what has happened there, what's going on there, could you explain to them why it was so important for you and others to leave?
Yes, there were several factors. For me, I'll mention a few. After the country got independence in 1948, it went into a downward spiral, economically and socially, I think, for a number of reasons. First of all, was political mismanagement. If you look at the news today, the country is officially bankrupt and it's being bailed out by the IMF and other creditors from around the world. So this was something that I constantly saw us losing things. First imports were banned, then foreign exchange couldn't be taken out of the country, and it was a shrinking world. That was the first thing. And then the second thing also was my mother tongue is English. I was raised in English, spoke it at home. And then the country decided for political reasons to go and make the national language Sinhala and also the medium of instruction in schools, which was a fatal mistake, because Sri Lanka had a standard of English that was probably the best in all of Asia, right? Going from Japan right down to Turkey, if that's the geographical definition of Asia. We had a fantastic standard of education and also of English. And when the national language changed, a lot of these people left. The English speakers left. The English teachers left. And the country slumped in their language. India, for instance, was not considered to be on par with Sri Lanka when it came to English. But all the call centers went to India when they should have been coming to Sri Lanka. And I remember going back to Sri Lanka after a 21-year gap And I was appalled when I spoke to people in English and I saw how the language had eroded. They're trying to come back now, but they're behind in the race. So that was another thing that affected me. Then, of course, the civil war started when I had left Sri Lanka. I was living in the Middle East, and then the civil war broke out, and some of my friends died, and my father was blown out of a plane, but that's another story. He survived, and I realized I couldn't go back, so I had to find another place. And then the West, at that point, talking about the late 70s, early 80s, had hit the highest point post Second World War of social and economic development. These were countries that attracted us because people were living just lives, fair lives. They were looked after. There was social justice. There was respect for the rule of law. I have to say that has changed a little bit since the 1980s and when greed got into the culture. But
I know.
at the
They
time
were fun, but they caused some problems.
yes, at the time I was thinking of emigrating, these places looked as beacons of hope from where I was going down. So all these things led to finally a move. And it was not just me. There was a whole bunch of people
No, it was
who moved.
it was the dream. Like everybody was like Canada or the UK or the US or Australia was very popular as well.
Yes, I even
Now,
went to Australia.
the language thing, I'm trying to piece it together in my mind with Milltown.
Yes.
It was a very dangerous thing too. Like if you spoke with the wrong accent, if you could end up
Yes.
dead.
Yes, and the bigger issue was in the case of Sam, my character from Milltown, is that he's a Tamil, and he's married to a Sinhalese woman, right? So there are two different ethnic groups, and they were the ones fighting each other. The Sinhalese was the majority, and the Tamils were the minority. Before the war, there was no problem. Sinhalese, Burghers, Muslims, they all intermarried each other. My best friend was down the street I lived was a Buddhist boy on one side and a Muslim boy on the other side. And we used to play cricket and we had no problems. We used to go into each other's houses for ceremonies and enjoy the best of all the worlds. But then the moment this barrier broke out and the civil war broke out, there was this fear. Oh my God, I'm a Tamil man. Should I take my child to a Sinhalese doctor? Will he kill him? I'm married to a Sinhalese now. Are they going to start fighting in the house? So it was this unnecessary conflict that was created by the external factors that came into the domestic scene. And Sam, in this book, comes to Canada with that, right? He has inherited that problem. So his domestic scene is somewhat messed up. And then he has to come to this new country, and not only a new country, but a small town in this new country. So he's now moving cultures within a culture and try to make a go of it. And so I wanted to bring all those issues on the table. And now, of course, Milltown was a little bit exaggerated because I put all these in at the same time. And so the whole town explodes. But that's where the power that's where the power of fiction comes in, is you artificially load things that could happen into a condensed time zone, and then you create drama, right? So that's what I did.
Well, and that's done well because your books, I read them both in one weekend because that's what I had to read them in, and the world was kind for that weekend. And they do intermingle, but it was an easy thing to do because they start with action at the beginning right to the end. Like you definitely show, not tell, what is going on, because it's just, I have a soft spot for Sam.
Yes.
I'm just like, poor Sam. So, because he's just trying the best that he can, and the world just keeps happening around him. But speaking of Sam and experiences in life and all that do you believe, because there's Sam and then who was a married man with a family that came over to Canada, and then there's Martin, who was a single man who came over to Canada. Do you think that the ability to ground, like Sam was grounded by his family, he saw no choice but to follow a path and make it secure, whereas when you're single, you can follow a few little tangents here and there. Do you think that helped with his experience? Like the idea that I need to fit in, I need to make this work. I have no choices.
Yeah, so I think you're saying, is it the person who creates the journey or the journey creating the person?
Yes.
Uh, yeah,
Did
I think
I
it's the
write that before?
yes, I think the person pretty much creates the journey, because the push, the internal push by that person is what makes the journey even start. But having said that, the journey then changes the person, because you grow in this journey. And in the Ulysses Man, I called it the Ulysses Man is because it's modeled on the journeys of Ulysses coming back from the wars, and he's trying to get home, and he's never getting home. He's getting detoured all over the place before he lands home, and then when he gets home, he has to fight to regain what he's got, and that transforms him from when he left the wars to when he finally regains his home, and so the journey does transform you. But if you relate me back to Sam or to Martin, I think I'm more like Sam in terms of the journey, because I came also with my family. I had a young family, and we journeyed together, and we clung to each other, because it was very comforting to have them around you when the world was so hostile around you. But in terms of circumstances, I was not a Tamil. I was not fleeing a civil war. I was a burgher, so I'm more like Martin in the Ulysses Man, in terms of my personal circumstances and the motives that push me out. So and that's why I also wrote both these books, because I felt if I'm going to explore the immigrant experience as it happened to me, then I need to cover it from two angles. One, the family man coming with his family, trying to fit in, and then the second is the single guy coming purely out of his own motivations to this country. So that's where the two break out. But certainly the journey did change us, changed me. Changed the entire family, and for the better. I think, because we all grew from that experience, and we are much more aware of the world now than we were before we came here.
So I do wanted to suggest to listeners out there that you do read these two books together, possibly not in a weekend because the dishes were piled like this high, but I think that they do really go together. Like they're not a series, they're sort of companion books.
Yes, that
Uh,
that would make sense.
yeah,
That's good. Yeah.
yeah, because the two perspectives work that way. Now, I I'm just going to look at my writing, because if I wrote, does the journey create the person or the person create the journey? I'm much better in my writing than trying to think of the questions off my head. So you were older, still young, but, but older, and you have experienced a lot of life. Do you think, like, I'm just thinking, I spent some time in Northern Ontario, and coming back home to Southern Ontario, like a place without a lot of malls and without a lot of this. And I grew up in Southern Ontario, but coming back, it was, I would see all this stuff and see all these malls, and this unnecessary things, and I would go into shock. So when you first come and you see all of these things, does that then become a part of the dream and something that you let go over time to for the security that you were originally looking for?
Well, the material comforts don't last very long. I remember when I was in Sri Lanka, we didn't have a lot of things, and that was one of the drivers of pushing you out. But when I first moved to Dubai before I came to Canada, and I was in Dubai
Oh,
for six months. All my material needs were met, and I was bored, because that's the low end of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? It's basically once your shelter and comfort and all that is taken care of, you're looking for something higher than that. And I think the biggest thing that appealed to me in coming to Canada was the freedom. The freedom to express oneself, which I realized was very strong with me. That's why I'm a writer. That's why I will defend whatever I write. in as much as there's these various movements that come on from time to time and tell you not to use certain words or not to speak about certain people, I don't buy that. So that was the biggest trade-off, or the trade I made, was to giving up my home but to accept freedom. Because where I lived in Sri Lanka, there was no freedom in a sense. There was no economic freedom, and political freedoms were also being somewhat narrowed. And of course, in the Middle East, they are all dictatorships, sheikdoms and dictatorships. So you really don't have a lot of freedom at all. As an expatriate, you have nothing. So for me, Canada was the first step in freedom. And I remember writing to my dad like a couple of days after I arrived here, saying, "Dad, I can smell the freedom in the air here." He was back in Sri Lanka. I said, and the funny thing was, when I'm walking in the malls, I don't sense the Canadians who are walking beside me smelling that freedom. Because
no, they don't. They complain and they go on, and this is one of the reasons I want to get them to read, so that they can see and appreciate. As long as we can read basically what we want to think, what we want to say, I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
It is. And then, when some guests write on their Facebook page, Vicky doesn't hold any punches. I allow them to do that. I don't censor them, though. I think Vicky is very delightful, though I like the image of not holding any punches. So, I'm just looking for my identity now.
That was meant as a compliment.
Yeah, no, it was. Are you kidding? I was like, whoa. I like that. But I didn't know how to react to it, because there's still a lot of punches in here I'm holding. But
okay, all right, go for it.
No,
I'm a big boy. I can take it.
It's not you. Maybe the people of Canada. I do get frustrated when people don't know what they have, and there are countries that, for example, when the students protested, later their bodies were floating down the river.
Yes.
And so, yeah, you don't get over trauma like that. I just want to point that out. That's too much. And no, that is not happening here. So we all need to check our realities and see that we do have it very lucky, and that there are still people fighting to get here that want what we have. So we should be a little more appreciative and thankful for that. That being said, Canada is great. What now, in the books you talk about some of the experiences that your protagonists went through, their families went through, some of the reactions, like the surprise that you could speak English, or Sam could speak English, or whatever. What is your experience with that? How did it taint or not your coming?
Well, I didn't have too much of that, because I spoke English. It's my mother tongue. I spoke it with an accent.
I was going to say, I can't. You don't. No, I can't say that. But
yeah, no, I'll
you would be cool.
I'll say it. I'm not a typical Sri Lankan immigrant as Canada has portrayed them, right? Because the typical Sri Lankan immigrant was of the Tamil sector, because a lot of them came during the Civil War, and English was a second language, and they had to learn a lot more in order to fit in, and they've done extremely well. I mean, you look at the businesses that they have created and the culture that they have created here. They've done extremely well, but they had a harder go of it. And Sam, I think, is a good example of that. He was trying to start a little shop and attract established Canadians to come and eat his rice and curries, and he was having a hard time with that, right? But eventually he persisted and he got through, and then he started becoming quite successful. But is that initial push of getting the other to see that you're not a monster, you're just different, and you also are used to playing a harder game of cricket. You're not going to roll over and play dead, because you already fought too many battles just to get here, right? So that I think is common among most immigrants. But some are able to move a lot faster because they have a few things already in the bag, and knowing the language and knowing the customs, and being able to also learn fast, think on your feet, and move, I think helps a lot. Um, so
Well,
you,
and the
so you have to
basics
have
too.
a bit of an open mind about things, and be prepared to adapt when you come here.
Yeah, which is a survival instinct.
Yes.
So if you've been surviving through all of that kind of thing,
Yeah.
the as I said, the overthinking is actually helpful in those situations because you're working at the reactions. And Sam did prove, like I said, love Sam. I'm going to keep going back to Sam. Sam did prove that it's the staying power, that holding onto who you are, people get to know you. And the food is a thing because people come together over food. They talk over food. There's nothing to fight for because there's food in front of you. There's a comfortability. And he was willing to show them that part of him, his culture, and they in turn reacted to him.
Yes.
So his attitude made a lot of difference. It wasn't easy that he moved from a more urban area to a smaller town. And there's a lot going on in that town, so they were looking for a scapegoat. I mean, let's just put it that way. There was, which brings us to the lot going on in that town. Now, I've read 4 of your novels so far, and they all have that idea of secrecy, that
Yes.
the world is not what it seems, that Shane just wants to blow the lid off of the perfect little pictures and show people what's really inside, which I admire because that's where I don't pull punches. I'd like to join you in that. This is the way it is. Um, so in this book, the family, I don't know, to me there seemed parallels between keeping your children safe from outside forces, from the politics and things like that, and then keeping your children safe from reputations. The reputations become important. It's a certain kind of death, a social death, but it doesn't have that same importance as far as I can see, and that the children in turn rebel against those secrets instead of like a political secret. And is that what was going on there, or just everybody wanted money?
No, I mean, secrecy is an interesting topic. I think we should talk a little bit about that because,
We can.
yes, because I think in this society, one of the things I've seen, which is a downside, is we like to keep our skeletons in the closet. We don't like to talk. We talk nice things. Nice. I'll come back to that word, nice. We even write nice stories, and we like our stories to be nice and mild. And therefore Canadian literature doesn't get into the big spots, right?
Comfortable.
Yes, they're comfortable, they're safe, they're passive, and so as long as we are nice, we will be kind of middle of the road, middle grade, a middle grade nation. But if you really want to get into, and I consider literature to be going into the harder areas. In fact, I was writing a quote from Saul Bellow a little while ago. He says, "Writers mature when they force themselves to face hard experiences." He goes on to say the greatest threat to literature is conformism. So you think about those. You think, okay, literature is supposed to show the underbelly of life. Not only the underbelly, but the good and the bad, and we should be brave and bold to showcase that. And as readers, we should be brave and bold to be able to read about these things and not just only appreciate nice literature. So when you bring it back to Milltown, you have this nice little town, which has a lot of secrets, a lot of dysfunction that is swept under the carpet. And then you bring this South Asian family in there to open a restaurant, and things start to go wrong. Not because the South Asian family is stirring up problems, but because they attract certain elements, and in the fusion of it,
Anger.
the anger, the dysfunction starts to emerge, and then things go wrong. I'm not going to give away the plot, but things go wrong, and then the whole town explodes, right? And you suddenly have a guy running around bumping people off, and people being kidnapped, and and the world is coming to an end. And these are all things that are possible. And so,
I believe them.
and in the end, the idea is that, by exposing, we get to understand things, and we can probably resolve things. We have a better chance of resolving them if we expose them than if you just keep them hidden forever. And that was the intention. So I'm a big proponent of not writing nice literature.
That being said, no, you don't write nice literature. I'm like, oh, Shane, I enjoy it, but there's still the idealistic aspect that you can find at least contentment
Yes.
at the end of the road. But that's up to you. There's always that second chance going through in your books, and so that's the question. Do people give us second chances, or do we create them?
No, I think we get them. Call that mystical or whatever. I've had plenty of second chances in my life. I have second chance of marriage, second chance of country, second and third chances of homes, multiple chances of careers, which stopped and started and began again. I even had a second chance of life. I had an accident once and I was pronounced dead, and then through some medical intervention, they got me fired up again, and I'm here 5 years later. So second chances are given, and our choice is to recognize them, that there are a second chance, and to pounce on them and make them work for us and make them better than the last time around, right? So sometimes we don't recognize the second chance, and it just goes over our head, and then we say, woe is me, right? So that's one. And then this business of hope, yes, I do believe, and in fact, all of my books, whether the hope is hidden, and it's for the reader to spot it, or whether it's more obvious, there is hope. In fact, some of my titles of my books, I had one which is called Crossing Limbo. It was a collection of short stories. And it's basically people in limbo. And they can go back into hell, or they can go forward into the promised land. It's their choice. Some of them make it, some of them don't. But there's always a glimmer of hope or light at the end of the tunnel, and it's for them to take it. That is important. That's my moral position on things. I don't really like to end it in despair, where everybody dies, and so then you wonder, why the hell did I read this book?
That was the 70s, right? You watch this movie where someone goes through all of these trials and tribulations, and then they just go up on top of a hill and set themselves on fire, and you're like, what? No. I don't like that. I don't find it symbolic or not. It is just not necessary. There's no symbolism there, as far as I can see. So we're going to go to the publishing aspect of you for a second, and then we'll get back to the comments. Yeah. The publishing aspect, when you said conformity, writing with conformity, my ears perked up, because this is one of the things I find problematic to me, and I'm all important. Problematic to me in the publishing world is that they publish by trends.
Yes.
And so you're not getting anything different. It's like, it doesn't even matter if they're looking for horror and you're writing horror. It's not the right kind of horror. It's trends. And this is why I think that smaller presses, indie writers, all of that is so important, because it's the only way we get something different.
Yes, I have to agree with you. I mean, I'm really disappointed in some of the larger houses that we respected in the past, published breakout books like Lolita and Ulysses and so on, are now going for these very formula driven books because they sell, right? I mean, the blind masses just
it's the top 20 authors that sell. That's just, nobody gets past them. Well, people get past them.
I'm not even interested in reading the prize-winning books that come out today, because they really don't turn my crank. They are just more of the same. And so I'd like to see the small presses one day being recognized by these prize juries and saying, okay, for this year, we're going to turf the big guys and we're going to take the small guys and see whether they're giving us any groundbreaking literature. Are they
You are
extending the form?
idealistic.
No, are they extending the form? Are they
Yeah.
are they moving the literary novel to the next level? Or they, are they being somewhat irreverent about what we consider to be the boundaries? And if that were to happen, then literature will continue to grow and evolve. So yeah, it's a never-ending problem. But I take comfort in the fact that I'm publishing the books of writers that I want to publish, that I find are in who share my thinking that the genre has to be extended. And so I will continue to do that. And whether we end up winning prizes or whether we sell millions of copies or we sell no copies, we're still creating the art that we want to create, and that is never going to be taken away from us. That's the freedom that I came here for, and I'm going to defend that.
And I will help you defend that.
Thank you.
Shade. Um, it is. I bring us back to when people like judge things on this or that, or whether it's published or it can't be. Instead of looking under the cover, Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol, which no one would publish, and so he took it upon himself to publish it because he needed some bucks. Okay. But the point is, what is one of the books that everybody knows of, whether they've read it or not? It's everywhere. Been spun off into so many different things. And it was basically about the greed of the time, and that money isn't everything. So and it was way out there because having ghosts was just not that was a secular thought. So it wasn't in keeping with the Christmas spirit. So we have to remember that it hasn't always been like this. And speaking up and speaking out through our writing, our literature is important. I want to see more of it, and I go digging for it. So yes, Janice says, hi Janice. Thanks, sir. He writes thought-provoking literature. And I agree. I had that in my opening. It is thought-provoking. It's like an exercise. Oh, because somehow it reels, not that everything is about us or me, but sometimes it reels back into how would I deal with that? I don't know if that's only me, but like where do I go on that scale of the sparkly is more important than the substance? How it always makes me think about my choices and things. Like it's just like a checkpoint. I mean, I don't go into a deep over okay, I overthink, but I don't go into it. But it does bring it back for us to to think about our own situations. Like I said, to think about our own freedoms, to find appreciation in our life. And Janice says there isn't enough. Hi, Janice. She would enough nice in the world. In my own honest opinion, nice is needed, and nice is needed. But sometimes we have to look at the not so nice to become nicer people. Does that
Yes.
make sense?
Yes. Yes.
To
And
be
also to appreciate what we have, because we do have nice lives. I mean, I have a nice life. I don't deny it. I had bad things happen in the past, but and I'm not going to exchange what I have now for what was in the past. However, what was in the past made me who I am today and make me appreciate what I have today. And I think that's what we need to, our literature should embrace all of that.
I think like of the people I've interviewed, people I know in life, that some people that have come from very dark situations, whether it's I know one gentleman who lived through in South America, being grabbed and pushed down just because he was carrying a guitar case, and he
Mhm.
was obviously an artist, and they're not to be trusted. All of this, sometimes the people who have faced the hardest things are just the happiest and kindest people out there because they've worked through that and they understand. Janice Barrett, I've got two. I can say author, but they're both authors. So author Janice Barrett said, exactly. He makes me to think about my stance on whatever subject he writes about. Yes, thank you. See, that's why you're an author, Janice. Because You worded that. But I'm thinking on the spot and it doesn't come out always clearly. But you do. You make us stop being looking thought. You're thinking about that, Shane. I can
Yeah,
tell.
I'm
Is
thinking
that
because
what I do? And yes, you do. Two people have voted.
yeah. So I'm going to expand on that a little bit. There was I don't know whether we talked about it the last time we spoke, but I raised this many times. I like books to have the four E's. You know, they have to be engaging, entertaining, educating, and enlightening. Uh, and so a lot of books in the genre category go into the first two E's. They're engaging and entertaining, and that's it. And there's nothing more beyond that. So if I can get people into the enlightening part, which is the fourth E, where they're basically questioning their position on things, as Janice just mentioned, then I think I've hit a home run there, right? I've not only engaged and entertained, I've maybe educated them a little bit, let's say through this book on Sri Lanka, for instance, but I've also got them to question their position on certain things that are happening in the world. And that interrogation that has gone on in the course of reading the book is an exercise that the book has provided and the author has provided. And so that's what I aim for. I don't hit it all the time, but I try to aim for that.
I think it's because when you go into different learning styles, right? There's some people that just need to see the facts in front of them 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, when I see the facts in front of me 1, 2, 3, 4, it's not getting anywhere. But you put a story behind that. You put a biography. You put human beings experiencing it. I learn more than I would ever learn in a textbook
Yes.
because I'm living that moment with them. I'm standing by that river. I'm feeling, the fears, and I come out and I learned more in your books about Sri Lanka than I ever knew before. And it's really opened my eyes to a lot of things. And I don't see. I've had people ask me about this before, when I've watched certain shows or whatever, and they'll say, "Why are you watching such a depressing thing?" And that always startles me because I don't find it depressing. I find it inspiring. I find it um, fantastic to see the strength of humanity, their ability to survive, to take on, to keep going. It is just such an inspiration. I would rather they didn't have to go through that, as I would rather that you hadn't had to go through that, Shane. But it is still inspiring to hear and read your story and to know, otherwise we can't get better, right?
There you go.
Okay. Brian read a lot. So everybody get ready. Brian has always, in today's world of indie publishing, do you think that publishers, large and small, are mattering less and less, or are small presses filling an important place in the publishing ecosystem?
Well, I'd like to think that small presses are still fulfilling a role in the ecosystem. Um, there is a loss in that area around because there's the big guys, the big three or four who are out there doing formulaic stuff. There's millions of self-published authors who are vying for attention, and nobody really is paying attention because you don't know who is good and who is bad. There's no quality control in that area. And so the small presses are trying to curate the good stuff that's out there, that's not picked up by the big guys, and present that to as wider audience as they can. And our biggest challenge is widening that audience. Right? That's why we arrive on shows like this, and hopefully people listen to us and say, "Okay, let's go pick up one of those books and see whether we can read it." But if they don't listen to a show like this, they'll never hear about us. So
So
yes,
I'm doing my part, Brian.
yes, you're doing your part. So what we're suggesting here is that yes, they are filling that role. The question is, are there enough of us to do that? Because it's not just coming and
And
publishing what
enough honest ones, Shane, because we also have the problem with certain small presses.
I know exactly. That's true. Now I've been doing this I'm going on my 14th year. I haven't become a millionaire out of this. Okay, I've not lost money, but I've not made a lot of money. I'm doing this for love, um, and also to see some of my books come out, because that way I have a pipeline for my books to come out. I make no bones about that because nobody's going to come and offer me a pipeline. But there has to be maybe 100 more people just in Canada alone doing that, and so maybe 1,000 in the United States doing that on a sustained basis of curating content and showcasing content to create that feed between the ones who are self-publishing and the ones who become multi-million-dollar selling books. So yes, I hope so. I hope we are filling that middle niche.
I think it's important because, well, I would like to see all publishing continue to exist because I don't want to live in that's a slippery slope when we stop, getting works out there, regardless that dries up because we think about what the world was like before the printed word was out there. But when some people don't have technical expertise like Brian does, or or whatever, it is good to know there are people you can trust out there to get them online to get that package going, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot of work involved from point A to point B, and not everybody has the abilities to do all of those
And
things.
it may decrease over time, because as this generation rolls over into the next, a lot more people are more technically adept, and they consume their literature electronically. So the need for small presses doing what they do today may decrease. They may end up being more like curators of saying, you should read this book and not this one. Maybe, like book reviewers who will pass on
Well,
opinion on the book, as opposed to actually manufacture the book.
now I'm going to make this all about Vicky. No, so as at doing this show, in order to maintain my integrity and to support indie authors, I need to say no to some books. Um, and you have to say no to some books coming in on
Yes.
you. Do you ever feel evil? Sometimes, like, how do you deal with that, Shane?
It is very hard. In fact, if you ask me what's the hardest part of being an indie publisher, that's the hardest part, because I usually get 10 good books that from the submissions that come in, that I know will do well. But because my bandwidth is half that, I have to say no to 5 good ones, right? And I try to be kind. I try to give them some positive feedback and tell them where they could, maybe make the book a little stronger. Some of them come back to me in the following year, and I have actually published some who have come back to me in a year when I had a gap. But it is extremely hard. At the same time, it's like what Saul Bellow said: you have to tackle the difficult situations in order to get stronger. And just like reading difficult literature, you have to make the difficult choices to some of these people and some of these writers. And I continue to do that. Sometimes I don't get good responses back. People don't take it well. I understand that too, but sometimes they do. And I've seen books that I've turned down come out later self-published or published through some other press, and so good luck to them. But yeah, that is tough. I don't know how to solve it. Maybe a
Um,
robot. Maybe I let try a robot and have them read all my manuscripts in the future. That's possible.
but it does work because reading Janice Barrett's book, which was fabulous, Authorized Cruelty, led me to your books because I thought, okay, and so I have trust there are several other books on your list I'm interested in reading, probably all of them eventually, but I'm but human. There's one particular, but I trust before even going into that book that it is going to be a good book because I know that what you publish and what you find acceptable. Do you know what I'm saying? So it
Yes,
does
I hope so.
work. It's important. It's important that you keep the integrity of Blue Denim's name.
Yes, and I do get involved with each book. I mean, Janice will tell you, and all my authors will tell you that I do impose uh,
Oh, not you.
into the structure of the book to make it better. I mean, to make it better and to raise the author above where they think they have settled. And I'm saying to them, no, you can do better. You can do more than this. And so, it's like a coach who's pushing people to excel, to reach a standard that they didn't think they could do. But you need help. You can't just let them, strain themselves and burst a gut or something. You have to guide them, and hold the hand a little bit. And so eventually, yes, they do. And I'm pretty proud of the books that I have published. And my regret is that not enough people are reading our books, because we are small and we don't have a lot of marketing dollars. Now you are helping us by interviewing us on these shows.
But that's not why I'm doing it. I don't care about you. No, but they're good books and they need to be out there. And everybody goes for. I've already said to myself, I've had a couple big names now, but should I still want to do indie, small press, whoever is a big name, if should it come to that, it is, because it is important to me to get those books out, and I'm not even getting any money for them. But it's just there has to be diverse voices, and I mean, of any opinion, we have to remain open-minded. But if we're going to be open-minded, we have to be open-minded. But it is so important to get different voices, and indie writers, things like that, tend to be of an older maturity. And I always say, I think it's happening because, there isn't that table. Kids don't feel like they have to listen to their elders. So we have to tell our story somewhere.
No, one of the things that is obviously I started off this interview thinking we were going to talk about my books, but now we're talking about being published.
We'll go back.
No, but let me just close the publishing discussion with this point, is that it is very true that the indie authors tend to be demographically or statistically a little older. And that's primarily because publishers, the big ones, are not really interested in older guys like us, because, the question is, how many books do we have left in us, right? Are we going to drop dead tomorrow? Is this a one-hit wonder? And my take on that would be, if they'd taken me on when I was 48, they would have had 18 books from me. Okay. But they didn't.
So now it's their loss.
At the same time, you look at the number of one-hit wonders we've had who are big names. And I can rattle off a whole list of them, but you can go look at the list on Google. You say authors who wrote one bestseller and nothing else. There's tons of them, and some of those names will surprise you. They were young when they published that famous bestseller, and they did nothing after that, or very little after that. And so you can't use age as a determinant of productivity. And that's a mistake that a lot of the big guys who are using statistical measures to gauge a person's output. And so unfortunately, until that changes, yes, you're going to have a lot more people who are in the older demographic writing indie books and being published through indie publishers or self-publishing.
Let's
get back to my books.
Well, you said you also, before you said you also wanted to get, out the other books out there too. So yeah. I was just trying, Shane. Okay. So Shane's books are good. Buy them. That is all.
I'll send you a list of my other authors' books, and you can choose from that.
Am I reading the Limbo book next?
Oh, you
with
can
the short stories.
You can certainly read them. It's a great book. It's a great book. In fact, the cover in that book caused a huge furore. If you look at the cover on the, it's a cover of a young woman on the railway track, and when it was first put on Facebook, it went on to a stream of insults and compliments that came on saying this is sexist, this is this, this is that, this is that. And I said, look, I didn't even pick this because that book was initially published by another publishing company. And I said they read the book and they decided that this was going to be the cover. The cover was supposed to depict a young woman who was contemplating suicide, and she was on the railway tracks waiting for the train. Whereas on the other side of the railway tracks was an old guy like me, who had a bunch of health-related issues, who was also waiting for the train to take his life. And it was this, this meeting of the two minds, the young and the old, sort of saying to us, we don't really have answers for these two generations, right? So they're waiting for the train to get out of here. And so that was the intention. But of course, the cover caused such a furor. The book probably fell apart somewhere. Nobody touched it, but it got good reviews. And I would certainly encourage you to read it because there's some challenging stories in there. They're also taken from real life and real situations. And you could argue whether those stories will stop and make you think, which I try to do.
And in which you do um, very well. I never leave your books without thinking, Shane, which is what keeps bringing me back. I think a lot, even though other people might argue that possibility. Now, last time we talked, you were working on a book about robots.
Yes.
And you had this whole AI thing going on in your head. And how goes the book about robots?
Okay, so it's timely because I received the edited manuscript back. I usually send my books out to be edited by a third-party independent editor. It came back 2 days ago. I haven't opened it yet because I'm now in that situation of being the writer who's scared of seeing his masterpiece mutilated by the editors.
Someone hurt my baby.
Something that I do with my writers, so the shoes on the other foot sort of thing, and I'm thinking, oh my God. But I know that it's a necessary step that I have to take. I have to kill a few of my sacred cows. I have to change a few things because here's this impartial, and this editor is a very well-known editor. She's edited Giller Prize-winning books in the past. And so I have to listen to her and take her advice, to heart. So when I finish with this interview and after I've had a few drinks next week, I will sit down to read my book in the edited form. And I think it will be better.
The big red little lines.
The biggest problem we're having, and this is maybe you can help me, is not so much the editing. I mean, we'll get through that. I know we'll get through that and the book will be fine, is the title. Right. So the title, I had it as, I called it In Search of Sentience. But it seems like that sounds too philosophical and doesn't at all suggest what the book is about. My robot's name is Victoria. So somebody is suggesting Victoria's
Is she evil?
Victoria's Secret. I said, no, I don't want to lose.
Oh, God. After that whole limbo cover thing.
No, we've been there before. Somebody suggested Fika with Vicky. And I said, no, I think I'll have a lawsuit from there too. So
you're so frightened of lawsuits.
I know.
Why is that?
It happens. Anyway, so I'm trying to wrestle with that. What is the right name that would conjure up the message that I want to get across from this book, right? Because I've basically taken two industries. I've taken the publishing industry because one of the protagonists is the publisher, a small publishing house, and then there is this guy who's created this robot, and the robot challenges the publishing business to say, I will drive you out of business, right? Because robots can write books now and are doing that. So there is this in play, and it's not only just the publishing business, but every other business that can be robotized is now under threat. So the implied vision is, or the message in the book is, will we get it right? Will this robot be able to serve us in a productive way to make us extend the quality of life? Or will it be a battle to the death between the robots and the humans? Or will we create another Frankenstein monster? So these are the issues that I want to surface in my fourth E, the enlightenment and the education and the thinking that I want the readers to go through in reading this book. And at the same time, it's an entertaining book. It's moving fast. There's a lot of action in it, as you know, in my books. And so when I take people to the action, which is the kind of the softening the journey, making it easy for them to navigate and to go, to travel, I'm also planting these little questions in people's minds to say, are we doing the right thing here? And so on and so forth. So we'll see. I mean, I'm hoping that I'll get the book out once all these pieces are put together, title, editing, and all that, by next year, hopefully early next year, and then we'll see what happens.
So I'm remembering the drama. I'm just remembering the trauma I experienced after our last show, because I would say to people, I cannot believe that machines can ever replace people because they don't have the feelings. Like, can they really write the story without the feelings? Can they? And then all males around me were like, well, I think they can. It was this ongoing argument in my life. that I maybe I think emotionally, but I don't think so. I don't think ultimately it can. We will still have that hunger for another human being.
Well, I hope so.
And
But
how will Victoria rule? Is an idea for a title. Uh, will it be gracefully or
maybe
will it be?
maybe the title is Victoria's Reign.
Oh. I don't have a very good reign because my people don't listen to me. Okay, we'll just get through some comments here. Janice said Shane made my book so much better, but he explains why he wants changes made. It's always solid reasoning and making his changes easy. I think that's important that you do explain why. Brian says it seems that today it is okay. Okay, sorry. It seems to be the duty of editors to make their authors cry. Do you? It's great. And now you're crying.
Well, I don't know about making them cry. I don't certainly intend to make them cry. They may cry when they see what I've done with their work. But no, that's not the intention. The intention is to make them better.
Okay, I don't even know. Janice is agreeing with how about sentence to sentience? Okay, now I can see it better.
So I'll take it under advisement.
Yeah, Brian and I had that argument about okay. um okay. Aha, Dr. Frankenstein was the monster, not his creation. I keep telling you, Dr. Frankenstein is the monster, not his creation.
Yes, I said it was a Frankenstein monster, not Frankenstein.
He keeps pulling that out whenever he can. It's his thing. And I keep saying, no, in my opinion, Janice says Absolute Cruelty is a brilliant book. And yes, it is.
Thank you. That's very good. I'm glad I was part of that.
And Janice says program to fail or take over.
Okay.
Sometimes taking over is failing.
I'll take that also under advisement.
I'm going for Victoria's reign. I don't know why that just I'm finding that attractive. So you do how many books every year? But your books all come out sort of the same time. So when can we be expecting? I started talking about the business, and now I realize I'm not.
So I have done a few books in the spring. They're not as attractive in terms of the momentum. It's better in the fall. Because next year is also going to be the year of the Northumberland Festival of the Arts, where we have a lot of activity taking place in Coburg and my area. And to couple book launches with that is also helpful for us because it builds on that momentum. So I may end up, getting it ready and at the same time putting it out in the fall when my other books come out. So I'll probably do about 5 books again next year. So they'll all probably come out in the fall, and we'll just do a bunch of road shows and couple it with the festival and make a big noise about it. That's all we can do, make noise. People read it.
And just on a personal note, as an editor, how many times do you edit your book before you send it out for an editor?
Oh, yeah. I do about 3 drafts. I think the first draft is basically a dump, right? It's a dump of everything. Second draft is usually when I try to add pieces or take pieces out and develop certain parts and make it a little bit more. So the first draft is quite small. And then the second draft is quite large. And in the third draft, I bring it down to appropriate size. And that's when I work on the style of the sentences. But I usually find that my sentence style is a little different from a typical Canadian editor's sentence style because I come from the
classic,
the colonial era, and we tend to spell things in a British format, whereas it's more condensed in the North American style. So it's after about the third edit that I ready now send it to people to read, or even for an editor to edit, and then I'll get it back from the editor with all sorts of blood all over the place.
That you need to have a drink to face. Shane, author up. So Do we discuss your books enough? We never discuss your books enough,
No,
but
I think
we.
I think we've done well. We've probably gone over time, but that's fine. I'm happy that we got a chance to talk about publishing, and because that's, publishing and writing has now become intrinsically part of what I do. I cannot separate one from the other anymore. I used to, but I'm finding them merging. And to go in as a publisher and a writer is has a lot more street credibility now than it did before, and it's a more complete um, version of oneself, which I'd like to present, as opposed to saying I am only a writer or I'm only a publisher. I'm both, and I can't separate them.
No, well, no, you can't. I'm just going to turn the comments off now, so I won't see anymore as I say goodbye to Shane. You
Thank you very
always
much.
make us think.
Thank you very much for having me. This is really a pleasure. I think I spoke a little bit more today, and I was a little bit more loose with my comments. I'm hoping they're
Well,
taken in the right spirit. But I certainly, yeah, I would certainly like to see you have some of my authors on the show. I think they have written some really good books. I can send you a list, and certainly, I don't think you'll be disappointed with them. They're good speakers, good presenters, and they've got good books.
well, I feel that their books had to be good to get through you, Shane. And it's always a pleasure. I'm glad you're feeling more casual because like it's not a classy joint. It's not a classy joint. So I will say goodbye for now and thank you. Thank you so much for the books and the conversation.
Thank
We'll
you.
talk soon. Cheers. Okay. Next week, you better watch out. You better not cry. You better not pout. I'm telling you why. Santa Claus is coming to Fika. And whether you believe in him, you have to admit, as a mythological creature, as a mythological person, he has the best PR that's out there. So join us for that. And until then, may your coffee be hot and your story sweet. Thank you for listening, everyone, and take care.